The Muffin Tops I had advised back at the in the Nap episode, which was the first episode of the final disc of the DVDs for season 8. I advised at first was probably my least favorite on this disc. After, of course, reviewing the Millennium, I changed my mind and said this is definitely the Millennium. It's just that last scene of Newman going, "Treat!" That was my favorite part, and I just found it funny. But the Muffin Tops had a very interesting backstory behind it. So, I'm assuming this episode was originally not supposed to be called the Muffin Tops, because the Muffin Tops storyline was actually the last story they came up with, actually. It was not supposed to be in this episode. Well, it wasn't supposed to be an idea in general. But there was a story in there. I'm not sure who was going to go to. I guess someone had to go to Elaine, I guess. I don't know. Or somebody else, because Kramer was too busy in this episode. But Spike Feresten, the writer, used to have one of those Bearcat scanners. And he used to just use them and sit there with a lounge in a chair with a margarita in his apartment in New York and basically just listening on his neighbors. But I guess that story had to be dropped because Frasier had done that storyline earlier that week. So they had to come up with a replacement. And the idea of the Muffin Tops came from a girlfriend that Spike Feresten had, which is not only one of his former girlfriends. He had a story that was inspired by her, by another girlfriend, which will be in season 9. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But he had a girlfriend named Lori, who apparently only liked to eat the tops of a muffin. She wouldn't eat the stumps, which of course came a pretty good Elaine story in this episode. So yeah, I'm wondering what they would have been called. Maybe the reality tour, maybe, or the tourist, maybe. Because there was a couple other very interesting stories in this. Or the hairless chest, maybe. Who knows? But they could have gone on with something else. But yeah, the Muffin Tops storyline was actually, again, one of the last pieces. And of course, that's a early fun fact. But I haven't even talked about the episode yet. But let's talk about it. So the story begins. The main story of the Muffin Tops, though, besides, of course, the whole Muffin Tops storyline, which gets that cahoot, was the J. Peterman autobiography was released, and even though Kramer had bought back his stories from Peterman back in the Van Buren Boys, there was still some material needed. So some of Kramer's stories still got into Peterman's autobiography, in which Kramer found out. So he decided to go down to the book signing, and he was just going off and basically just trying to call himself the real Peterman. And from this, he started a Peterman reality bus tour, which the inspiration, of course, was from the real life person, the former neighbor of Larry David, who Kramer's character was inspired on. And again, at first they weren't going to call him Kramer because they were going to call him Kessler, because they knew if they used Kramer, that Kenny Kramer would go nuts, like exploit this whole thing and basically, try to, make his own brand and make himself off a business of this Kramer name, saying that I'm the real Kramer, which sure enough it happened. So they decided to do a storyline for Kramer, which he does like a reality bus tour, and called himself the real Peterman. So he's doing the Peterman reality bus tour, which of course was a long 1.5, 3-hour tour, something like that, and people were getting sick on it. And of course, also it was used for a hunt to try to get rid of the muffin stumps later in the episode. But that was pretty much the main story for the most part, which I believe that was the first idea for this episode. So everything else kind of worked around it. George's story in this episode, though, was at the beginning of the episode, in like the opening sequence, he was asked by a man to watch his suitcase. He was going to be right back. Well, George waited a long time and the guy never came back. So George got sick of it, so he put on the guy's clothes and he started walking around New York with those clothes. Some people, of course, were mistaking him as a tourist. And, George wasn't going along with it until he ends up meeting This attractive woman who's like the head of the visitors bureau and whatnot. And George goes along basically saying he's a tourist, visiting New York. And he mentions how he's from Little Rock, Arkansas. And throughout the episode, he was just like, going all over town, going on dates with this woman. But obviously the story of it, he's going to be going back to Little Rock, Arkansas. And that he works for Tyler's Chicken in Little Rock, Arkansas. Which is a parody. Well, it was supposed to be, they were going to be using Tyson's chicken. However, though, the company objected to the whole alcoholic chicken joke. So instead, they had to make a fictional brand called Tyler's Chicken instead. So everything's going well, but then, of course, the woman basically tells George that they shouldn't get too committed to each other because... Well, of course, George did buy a hotel room to have a reason to, make her still believe that he doesn't live in New York. But then when she basically says that, we can't really see each other anymore because, you're going to be going back to Arkansas and I got to stay here in New York. So that George goes, well, I'm thinking about moving here, actually. The lady says, oh, well, okay, but you would never survive in a dump like this. And she kept saying that, but George trying to prove her wrong. Of course, then George, took her to his apartment, and he basically made it look like he was getting ready to move into it. And then, of course, he even goes as far as saying he got a job with the Yankees. Which, of course, again, he was promoted because Wilhelm got fired in the previous episode because, he tried to take the blame for George's troubles. For him to get the job as the head scouting for the Mets. So now George has Wilhelm's job. And he has a whole new office. Well, of course, the visitor bureau, her name was Marianne. She said something to Steinbrenner about George working for Tyler Chicken. She believed that George was having two jobs. Which, of course, led Steinbrenner to some curiosity. Of course, he would then call Tyler's Chicken... And based off of Steinbrenner having the concerns of, George working two jobs, he worked out a deal to trade George to Tyler Chicken. And basically, in return, they were getting, their chicken products to sell at the concessions at Yankee games. Hence, causing George to lose his job with the Yankees. And then he was sitting in the bar all depressed. But then the guy that he had was supposed to be watching his bag for that was gone for a long ass time found George, basically demanding him get his clothes back. And then of course he has to call Jerry, who was begging him to come give him clothes, saying, I lost my job at the Yankees, I have no clothes, I need your help. And of course Marianne finds George in the bathroom and she goes, see, I told you wouldn't survive. So that unfortunately ends a chapter there for George, as his time with the Yankees did come to a close. And I thought that to be the reason why they did, but I did read in the trivia, the reason why they did this was because Larry David did start feeling uncomfortable, because this is only the third episode he had done, well, not including the finale, but this is only the third episode he had done since leaving executive producer. But of course, they did that because he felt uncomfortable speaking lines he hadn't written himself. Strange excuse, but, Larry David was a strange man in general. But that was the reason why they wrote off George working at the Yankees, unfortunately. But I think the stories that do kind of tie in together. So anyways, well, somewhat, not quite. I already went through the whole Kramer and reality bus story. There's not much more to say about that. Other than, well, there is a little more. So anyways... While at the book signing for Peterman's new book, Elaine runs into her old boss, Mr. Lippman from Pendant Publishing. First, I think we've seen him since the opposite episode. They were just catching up, and then some lady came over and complained something about that she found just a muffin stump in the garbage. And Elaine said, oh, that's me. I only like to eat the tops. And then... I guess Elaine made some comment about how she would love to open up her own Muffin Tops store to sell just the muffins, just the tops and not the bottoms. which then leads to Lippman taking the idea, and he started the business. At first, Elaine was mad at him because of this, but then Lippman ran into a problem where he wasn't really selling too well. So then he promises to give Elaine 30% of the profits if she helps him improve the business. Which she said, what you gotta do is you can't just make the tops. You gotta actually make the whole muffin and remove it from the stump. You know, it makes a much bigger difference. Which, you know, he took, but the only problem was he had to find a way to get rid of the stumps. So the first idea they had was that they were going to just put them by the homeless shelter, basically. They thought it would help them out. Well, then they got a complaint from the head of the homeless shelter about, you know, leaving the stumps, saying that it's an insult thing, that you think us homeless people are just going to eat just anything, just garbage and whatnot. So they couldn't take it there anymore. They were trying to take them to, but Elaine needs a way to get rid of them. So then she asked Kramer if she could put them on his bus for the Peterman reality tour, and he could drop them off at a dump on one of his next tours. Well, before we get to that tour, Jerry's storyline in this was, for some reason, he gained some weird, idea, weird habit of shaving his chest. But of course, he thinks it was a big mistake. He doesn't want his girlfriend Alex to think that he has a hairless chest. But of course, she finds out she likes men with hairless chests. But then again, he has to keep up shaving, but it's hard to keep up on because then eventually his chest does get itchy. So, of course, after several people not too thrilled with Kramer's Peterman reality bus tour for the Peterman reality bus tour, Jerry and Alex went on it. But this was the night where Kramer drives all over the place to try to find a place to dump the stumps. And everywhere he goes, they reject them because they're stumps. Don't know why, but people would not accept the stumps. And even one of them was this. It was at a place called Jiffy Dump. It was the same guy who, back in the Wigmaster episode, was the parking attendant at the Jiffy Park, that cheap place where basically the parking attendant was allowing them to take anyone's car and basically hook up at them and whatnot. So Kramer's struggling and taking everybody way out of the way and too long on his tour bus. But then Jerry was starting to worry because his chest was starting to get itchy. And again, he can't help shaving because Alex thinks he was naturally hairless. But then finally, he couldn't take it. And they do this thing where basically signaling that Jerry's going to turn into a werewolf. He sees a full moon, and he runs off the bus, runs into the woods, and goes by a tree and goes, "Oh!" and just starts itching at his chest. So then, of course, the episode actually ends with them saying that with Elaine with Lippman advising, of course, that the next their last resort to trying to get rid of the stumps is they're bringing in the cleaner, which Newman enters viciously in some type of a rental car, which it was supposed to be a parody of Pulp Fiction. I've only seen the movie one time, so I don't quite remember the whole thing. But basically, what Newman did was he went into the back room, had 4 things of milk, which apparently there was a continuity error. You never actually see him pour the milk into the glass, but then he's in there. But basically, him being the cleaner wasn't him trying to take the stumps and throw them away. He's basically eating all the stumps. Oh, God. I'm sure that was a very full belly there for Newman. But yeah. For some reason, the stumps were flagged objects that they weren't able to throw away, even though a dump is a dump. George loses a job with the Yankees and his clothes. I don't know what was more tougher, when he got mugged by that one sexy lady, or here where he lost his job with the Yankees because of him trying to keep dating this attractive tourist and lying saying he was a tourist. But then, of course, being traded to Tyler Chicken and losing his job at the Yankees. Jerry, just trying to shave his chest one time, and it just leads to a downfall for him. Kramer, though, his reality bus tour just didn't go over too well, unfortunately. Oh, well. But guys, that is the Muffin Tops episode. Actually, let's check a couple trivia before we go. Again, the main thing, the Peterman reality tour is a spoof of Kenny Kramer's Kramer reality tour, of course. Trying to do the same thing as he did. Let me see here. Oh, there is a scene also in this episode wherever Lippman and Elaine are discussing how to improve the Muffin Top store. And she says something about how you should remove the exclamation point out of the title, which is a throwback, of course, to the sniffing accountant, wherever Elaine broke up with her boyfriend Jake Jarmel over exclamation points, and Lippman had told Elaine to remove the exclamation points in one of the pieces of writing she was working on. I already said how the Tyson Chicken Company was originally supposed to be the company that George said he worked for in Little Rock, but then of course Tyson's Chicken did not approve of the whole alcoholic chicken joke, so they had to go with a fictional place called Tyler Chicken instead. Again, this is Larry David's final appearance as George Steinbrenner until the finale. Again, he apparently was not comfortable speaking lines he hadn't written himself, so that's why he got written out. Again, the Jerry, act like a werewolf, was from the horror film Wolff from 1994. Again, Newman, being referred to as the Cleaner, is a parody from the film Pulp Fiction. Apparently, also, every time there was the exterior shot of Yankee Stadium, you can see a 7 banner, which was honoring Mickey Mantle, who had died the year before this season, by hanging the number 7 banner. Again, the man from Jiffy Park is the same attendant at Jiffy Stump. And actually, there's an actor who plays as an extra on one of Kramer's bus tours. His name was Reuven Bar Yotam. He is also the same guy who appeared in season 9's episode The Frogger as a member of the clean crew, of the moving crew, who's helping George move his Frogger machine out of that pizza place, which we'll talk about that when we get to that in season 9. And again, guys, that's the Muffin Tops episode. Again, I find it funny how the Muffin Tops was not originally a story for this episode. Again, what would it have been called? I don't know. Maybe the reality tour? Who knows? Or the real Peterman? We'll never know. Surprised it wasn't in the trivia, of course, as well. But that's it, guys. That's it for the Muffin Tops. Next is the Season 8 finale. And we hereby will declare this the Summer of George. Why is it the Summer of George? We will find out next. And we will also see another special appearance from another actress as well. And Kramer is going to be holding an award from her show. What is that? We'll find out next. Once again, guys, what were your thoughts on the Muffin Tops? Be sure to leave your comments down in the comment section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. And peace out, everybody.